If you have ever been curious about Dungeons & Dragons, or the people who play it, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Ready Set Roll Insight, where you will learn how to be a better player and what drew people to the game in the first place. Now, join us for Insight with your host, Daniel Wells.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Ready Set Roll Insight. Today I have with me a special guest from the Adventure Incorporated podcast. His name is Anthony Reed. Hello, sir.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this.
I was happy that I got such a quick response.
Yeah, we're pretty accessible.
The process I was going through was I was sending you an email, but it crashed. So I was like, you know what, I'll just message him through Discord. Seems simple enough.
Yeah, we try to be as available on as many platforms as we can be, but yeah, that was I was like, oh yeah, I just got this on my phone. Cool, I'll respond.
Awesome. So yeah, you're the DM and producer of Adventure Incorporated. Any other titles I need to throw in there?
That's probably just those are fair. I do all of the editing for the show and put everything together. I got a couple other cast members who help me out with a lot of the production stuff behind the scenes in terms of organizing and trying to contain the chaos and handle the social media and everything like that. But anything that comes out from the show itself, I kind of do the production on, and then I do the dungeon mastering, which is I think it's probably behooves me to do both of those roles.
Trust me, I can understand that. Doing dungeon mastering myself, I don't think I could take the additional task of editing together all those voice lines. So let's get into learning a little more about you. When did you start? When was the beginning of your tabletop RPG experiences?
So I started playing tabletop RPGs in about 2000 when the 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons rulebook came out. I was working at a summer camp, and there was a group of older kids. So I wasn't even working yet. My parents worked there, and I was just hanging around. And there was a group of older kids who worked there who every day after lunch, there was a break period, and they would play Dungeons & Dragons. And so I wasn't even playing. I was just watching and absorbing as much of it as I could. I think I played one session with a wizard with a boar familiar, and I just had like the time of my life. And so from then on, I went and got the books. I played very sporadically over the next 20 years. But anytime that we got a chance to get a good group of people together to try and play, we were always shooting for that.
So you've been there for, 20 years now in tabletop experience.
Yeah, and I mean, pretty much from, as soon as I brought the book back to my group of friends back home after the summer camp was over, then I was the DM from then on also. It just became, no one else was going to do it. It was going to be me, and that just became the role that I fell into, and I absolutely love it.
A lot of character deaths in all those years?
Yeah, I think probably a fair amount, although I think that probably fewer than a lot of people have. I find that I tend to play games that are a little less crunchy than that, but that means that when the characters do die, they're incredibly memorable. I still have friends who talk about the encounters that we've had that have been fatal.
What's been your favorite edition?
I honestly think 5th edition is probably the best edition of the game that they have put out. I think that it pulls all of the best parts about 3rd edition and fixes a lot of the problems that it had. I had a big group in college that I played with that we did 4th edition, and I don't think that particular game was as bad as is remembered.
It wasn't.
I think it had some elements that were a little wonky. But I think that it had the absolute best encounter generation from a DM standpoint of any system they've put out. The sort of mix and match plug-in slots to build encounters was very straightforward and very easy in a way that I really even don't think 5th edition handles as it should. It gets very complex with multiple monsters. But I think 5th edition does a really good job capturing the spirit of D&D.
I also think it's the one game that you can have the easiest time making a character. Like, you can put up a character in an hour or less. If you're making a character for somebody who's never really played the game, you can be like, all right, here's how I can help you make your character. And it's just easy as it comes.
It is, absolutely. There's a great like sort of walkthrough to it, and the characters do feel unique even from one another. You can build 2 different rogues that are very different, for instance, and I think that's good. I do think the early levels in 5th edition can be a little swingy. They're for whatever reason they don't really stick around long, but that 1st and 2nd level are dangerous if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah. No. I try to get my players up to 3rd level as quick as possible, because that's when the survivability curve just hits a whole new stage.
That's where all the fun decisions are for the characters also.
The features,
Yeah.
the additional spells, all that good stuff. Well, let's get into your podcast, Adventure Incorporated. That's how it's normally stated, right? Adventure Incorporated, not The Adventure Incorporated.
Yeah.
How did it all come to be? What started you all into this podcast?
So the group that we play with, our 6, we were all friends in college back in the late 2000s, very beginning of 2010s. We were in an improv troupe together, and we did theater together. So we were all very, we'd spent a lot of time together. We were all close friends. We had fun on stage. And then we all went our separate ways for a decade. One of our friends on the show was having a difficult time in their life, and we wanted to be there for them. Like, we wanted to get back together and get in contact, but we were all over the United States. We were, I'm up in Maine. We had some in Chicago, some in Denver, some in Texas, some in Boston. So it was a real mishmash of where everybody was. And so Mike, one of the player who plays Gebetto, gave me the suggestion. He said, well, why don't we play Dungeons and Dragons on the internet? That would be a fun way for us to reconnect and give this other person an opportunity to have something to cling on to that'd be fun for us all to connect on. And I said, yeah, that would be really cool, but we're going to play like twice and then we're never going to do it again. Because that's, in my experience, typically how a Dungeons and Dragons group goes, especially when you play on the internet. Everyone's got busy lives and things happen, and it's not easy to make those sort of commitments. At the time, I was doing a podcast with my brother where we were talking about professional wrestling, and I said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we play a game of Dungeons and Dragons, but why don't we make it a podcast? That way we're sort of beholden to it. We're all performers. We're all like used to doing stuff for an audience. It'll kind of keep us honest and make us record these episodes. If we have people who, if we have one person listening, that'll make us keep doing it. That's just the way we are. And he was in, and so we reached out to the other players, and they were all on board, and we have been going strong ever since.
And your expectations were, having somebody listen to us, keep us going. But then there's the reality now where you're about to hit 200 episodes. When this episode released, I think you're going to be there at 200 episodes. By the way, congratulations.
Thank you
for hitting that goal. So the reality of the situation blew into a lot more than what you were expecting, or were you expecting what's going on now to be as it is?
I think that depends on who you talk to. I think for me personally, there was always the potential for this. If I know that this group of people, my friends, are all incredibly funny. They're all incredibly talented. And if we put effort into this, it was going to be something that would last as long as we wanted it to. And that it had the potential to be something that people would really enjoy. I think for some perspective, it's a bit of a surprise for some of the players. I don't think that they expected anyone to care about our silly little game. But it's given us an opportunity to reconsider, this started as a little group of friends trying to stay together. And now we've started to build a community, and there are people that we connect with that we only connect with because of the show. And that's cool. That's powerful. And it gives us an opportunity to think about this in a different way than just our buddies hanging out.
Were you expecting an invitation from Dragon Con when it came? Because I remember listening to you all on your show talking about, wait, we got accepted to Dragon Con to do a panel. Like, holy cow.
It's really funny. So the year prior, we had tried, we knew we wanted to do live shows because we are very comfortable live. That's where most of our experience was before this show, is doing improv and theater live, and we're comfortable with each other live. And we wanted an excuse to get together to see each other. So we had applied to do a live show at a small convention near my house here in Maine. The convention's called PortCon, and they do it every year up in Portland, Maine. We applied, and we were not able to find out if we were going to get on the show or not until like a month before the show. And by that point, everyone needed like logistics of getting here, flying in or whatever. Everyone was just going to stay at my house, but they needed to be able to get here. So we booked it. We said, we're going to, whatever happens, and we're going to do something here. So just book your flights and let's get together. We did not wind up getting a slot at PortCon, which was a real bummer because we felt like, it's a pretty small convention. We should have been able to get onto PortCon. We didn't get a slot. We wound up doing a live show at a local game store, which was a lot of fun. So it wasn't like we did stuff at my kitchen table all together for the first time, which was really fun. It was cool. It was a nice experience. And then we ended up applying to basically submitting a panel suggestion to Dragon Con on a whim. We have a connection with another podcast called Botched Podcast, and their cast have been really great interacting with us over time. We love to play with them and feud with them and do whatever else, but they've been really great to us, and they suggested that we do Dragon Con. They had a connection. They hooked us up with a name, and we talked to them. And ultimately, when we got selected for Dragon Con, I was not expecting that at all. It was like a super surprise. It felt like a massive win. Like we had pulled one over on somebody. And when we got to go do the show there live, it was an awesome experience. We were on a panel. We mostly filled the room that they had us in, which wasn't a huge room. We were fairly unknown quantity, but everybody seemed to just love the show that we put on, and we had a blast, and we had a ton of fun the whole weekend doing as much as we could and seeing as much as we could and spending time together. And it was a really cool experience, and I can't wait to see what we get to do this year, because we're planning to go back. And I'm very, we got several of the cast got selected for attending pro status this year. So that's just going to mean that we're going to be on more stuff and we're going to be more visible. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fun.
Well, that's amazing. I'm glad everything's stacking up well for you all.
Yeah.
Of course, the Dragon Con is the only Dragon Con that people are going to, not the only Dragon Con, that audio from that Dragon Con, only those people in the room will ever hear it.
I know, such a bummer. So we bought this year. We bought a recording device so that we can record ourselves, even if they don't.
Right. Well, let's step on to the next topic I have, which is building Ameneth, your world for Adventure Incorporated, and the continent Numerida itself. How did Ameneth come to be?
So Ameneth is actually the same world I have used for several campaigns, probably dating back to like 2005. I've done them on various continents. I created the continent of Numerida for this campaign on its own. But like the game I ran in college for a group of people, one of our players, Asher, the character's name is Asher, Rob is the player. He played in my campaign in college on a totally different continent within Numerida. When I left college, one of my buddies asked me to run a D&D game for his bachelor party. So we did like a 12-hour D&D campaign, and I ran that on another continent in Ameneth. So it's a world I've kind of slowly been building, and it has small bits. Like the things I used for Numerida were kind of the best bits of the world design I had for all of my other parts of Ameneth. But it also means that if the players ever pulled something wild and they're like, we just want to get on a boat and sail west, I don't have to do anything. I have that. Like, I know what's west of Numerida and we're ready to go. But I did want to create something that pulled in the best parts of that, and I wanted to create something that had its own experience and flavor. So, like, when I started to build Numerida, my first goal was to build something that had factions. I'd never really played around a lot with factions, but a lot of the games I was playing at the time, like things like Skyrim, had groups and factions that you could join that affected, was how politics worked. You needed to like build up your reputation with these factions. So I built a bunch of factions into the world guide. They're not things we ultimately have used a ton in the campaign, but they're all there and people could interact with them if they wanted to. And then the same for the kingdoms and the gods. I wanted to build the idea of like, I want a world where players need to gain influence with different groups in order to achieve their goals. And I'm excited for our final year of the campaign to see how that kind of bears fruit.
Which we are on the final year of the campaign as far as you've got it set out?
My plan, yeah. My general plan is that the final year, the campaign will end roughly March 2021. That we are entering the 5th year and final year of this campaign story arc. And then we will, the show won't end. There'll be more campaigns to come, but we'll have totally different characters, maybe even some different players.
Totally different players.
Maybe, I don't know.
You're all fired.
You're all
changing
out. Get out of here. But I mean, I also do want to give an opportunity because, this is 5 years ago, we were all in very different places. And so there may be an opportunity for people to be like, you know what? This is maybe more than I need in my life right now.
Yeah, true.
So I don't know that the cast will be the same, but it'll be an opportunity, a point for us to refocus and start a story over again in a new way, and build on what we already have, because I'm very, very bad at not drawing on the stuff we already have. Like, I don't think it's going to be, we'll say like people can start with the new campaign, but it's always going to be better if you know the old campaign.
Right. You'll be starting with the world already built, all the mess ups that the last party had. Here you go, new players.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Exactly.
Well, that answers goals to hit and moving forward.
I mean, there's the nice thing that I love about this is that, so I built out a structure for an idea of the plot. Like, I knew roughly what I wanted to have happen, big set pieces, and then I just let the players go, and I don't really know how this ends. I haven't been able to plan too much for the next campaign, because a lot of this hinges on what the players end up doing, what they decide to do, what they succeed at, what they fail at, and how the world looks after their confrontation. And I don't know what that looks like, which is exciting and a little bit scary, especially because for me, this has always been a big push of mine, is that this show, like, we have never missed a week. Since we started, we have put out an episode every Monday since episode 1, and we will continue to put out an episode every Monday until we finish. And but that means that when we first started the show, we started recording in, I think, January. We didn't put out our first episode until March, and I'd had months to prepare ahead of that. For us, we're going to end this campaign. Maybe we'll have a couple of like bonus episodes or something to give me some space, but there won't be a lot of time to craft what's coming next. And so it's going to be, a lot of it's going to be the trust that I already have with these players, and the very, very vague skeleton of an idea that I have that will have to transition and shape to whatever the shape of the world is, whatever the state of it is. And that's going to be really exciting and kind of scary.
I'm sure your players are hoping that they could just have a save point right before the end. Good Lance, man. Listening to it, there are so many things that just... I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's bad. It's very bad. If they mess up, it's all over.
I told my wife at one point that I wanted the podcast and specifically the players to feel like there was a pace roughly equivalent to spinning plates. Like that if they ever let one thing fall by the wayside, it was going to be bad. So we'll see how well they do.
So you all record like in batches because of your busy schedules.
Yeah, so
everything.
Basically we record once every 2 weeks. We record for about 3 hours, and then from that I pull 2 episodes that are either somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half, typically in the hour and 15-minute range. So there's like half an hour of just general messing around that I end up not using, but people complaining about their actual human lives that I don't think really other people need to interact with. But yeah, we do record, 2 episodes at a time to try and cut down on the amount of stuff we did. When we first started, we would record like a 6-hour block, and I would get about 3 usable episodes out of it. And some of it was that we didn't have as much experience, but some of it is just that like 6 hours is a long time.
People start to get delirious.
Yeah. Just the 3 hours is we get in, we get out, and it's pretty tight. And as time has gone on, I've gotten better about gauging my own time, and pretty much before I even sit down to edit an episode, I know where one episode is going to end and where the next one's going to begin. And I just, when I'm going through, those things are already kind of marked out just by the structure of what we've done.
All right. Well, let's ask a question about, we've answered the world building, but what about your favorite NPC?
So my favorite NPC is we have an NPC in the show named Clyde, and I love Clyde because he didn't exist in anything that I had been setting up ahead of time. The PCs wanted to cast Detect Magic in their room. They were afraid someone was scrying on them or there was something nefarious afoot. And so they wanted to cast Detect Magic. None of them had it prepared. And they were like, well, there's got to be a wizard around here somewhere. So they just made me on the fly make up this character, which was fun. And then they wouldn't let him go. They just I absolutely, because he wasn't important and had no relevance to what was going on, they really wanted to force him into this situation. And so over time, he's become incredibly important to the plot and incredibly important to the characters.
Super important or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever.
Or whatever.
And from there, it's been really fun to grow this character and have him be a part of this world in a way that I initially wasn't expecting, and have him go from there.
So would that be your favorite character moments, or would you say you have larger character moments, like those moments that really impressed you from your players?
There are a countless number of those. My favorite character moments, my favorite moments in the show are the ones that I'm not even a part of, when I just have characters interacting with each other in a meaningful and interesting way that I think carries plot forward and carries this progression between these characters forward. But I've been very impressed with the way that my players have accepted the world, bought into the world, and then really allowed it to affect them emotionally. We had a couple of NPCs get killed in one encounter, and as we're reading out, we're doing a eulogy for them, and we're playing this moment in game, and the players are crying. Like actually physically crying, and I can hear it through my headphones, and that was so powerful and like cool moment to me because they cared. Like they actually gave a shit about what we were doing. And these people don't exist.
yeah.
But they
still, it was the emotion.
But they still cared about it, right? And I think anytime, we've had the players take moments and internalize them and make character decisions that I would not have ever guessed, but that make total sense for the character and make total sense in the moment, and have these beautiful scenes play out because they trust that whatever is happening in this scene, we're going to build on together, and I can trust that whatever it is that they're doing for the purpose of making these characters better, making the story better, and making the show better. And that's been super cool to play through moments like that and really watch them blossom.
Well, I'd have to say that my favorite Geppetto, Mike, who plays Geppetto, has to be one of my favorite iterations of a rogue ever, because he does stuff that most people would not expect a rogue to do.
He certainly does that. One of my favorite things about Mike is that, and the character he's built with Geppetto, is that he came to me. He said, "I want to build a character who is super happy. He adventures because he loves it and it's fun. He has no dark past. He has no his parents are still alive. They love him. Everything is great, and he's a happy guy, and everything's fine." And I was like, okay, great. And obviously I subverted all of that, but the point was not like, he really was looking at this from a perspective of, he wanted to try and break what he saw as a traditional build for some of this stuff that he saw sort of trite, and to do something new with the character. And he, like you said, I mean, he's a rogue, but he doesn't, he's not dark, leery, hiding, I'm a solo loner rogue. Like, he's doing a totally different take on that in a really cool way, I think.
I think in combat, he subverts that a lot because he knows how much power you have given him in one tiny sword, sir. How much power he has over everything in combat.
And I also, I think Mike's really cracked the code more than any of them on how combat works, which is basically like, if you make it, if it's plausible and you make it cool enough, I'm going to let it happen. Like, if it's cinematic and seems like a fun thing to do, like, it's probably going to happen. So he abuses that a little bit, and that's fine. The weapons were interesting because I built them as a means. One of the things that I don't always love about D&D is, like, you get these magical weapons and they're basically your weapon until something better comes along. And I wanted to create a different feel for the weapons in this game because we had an audience, and I wanted them to be something like that you could kind of grow attached to the weapon a little bit too. Like the cool weapons from stories, like the Lord of the Rings, they have like Glamdring and Sting and like all of these cool weapons that are as much characters in a way as the characters are. And so I wanted to build a system that allowed me to have the players keep their weapons all the time, have them be cool, and have them progress and change and evolve along with the players. I think there's been mixed success on that. I think in some ways it achieved that goal, but I think in other ways it's difficult to maintain the paperwork associated with like leveling and empowering the weapons. That some of it went by the wayside, and it was never really clear to the listener anyway. Like unless you had a chart in front of you, and it was kind of convoluted in a way. But I really do like the way that the weapons have still been a part of the story and are important to the characters and are tied to them in a way. And so it did work out in some ways.
I mean, I used to do all that charting stuff that you were talking about, but after you get dealing with Keth for so long, you kind of realize the numbers don't match at all on the wayside, so you just burn your charts and hope for the best.
Yeah.
There's no way. There's no way, man.
I put a lot of trust into the players to handle their own stuff, and maybe some of that was maybe misaligned trust that I should not have been giving them, but it's fine. I think it all will work out, but yes, he definitely he's definitely made some choices that I don't think mathematically work out correct, but that's fine.
Well, we're coming up to close to the end of time here, so at the end of the interview, I typically ask my guests to give a piece of insight that people listening, players, DMs, whatever, can take that with them into further games. Anything simple from knowing the numbers or something bigger like playing true to your character.
To me, the biggest, most important piece of what makes a D&D game fun and what makes a D&D game good, both from the aspect of a player, but also from the aspect of a DM, is expectation setting. If you walk into a game and you are expecting the game to be played a certain way and it is not played that way, you will never have fun. No matter what role you are in, if you are looking for a certain experience and the game is delivering a different experience, that is going to be a problem. So I think it's very, very important for both players and DMs from as soon as you sit down at a session 0 or even before that, to make it clear the experience you're looking for, to make it clear, what you can have players expect to be seeing. Before we started the show, I sent everyone a document that basically was like, here are the rules. And they were pretty straightforward. They were like, 1, we're not going to be rolling against each other. This is not a PvP game. This is not an opportunity for us to steal from each other or stab each other in the back or whatever. If someone tries to do something against you and you want it to succeed, it succeeds. If someone tries to do something against you and you want it to fail, it fails. When you're dealing with me, we'll worry about rolls and other stuff like that. But when you're against each other, there is no PvP. And I was like, we're not going to worry about encumbrance and arrows and food and those fiddly bits. That's not the kind of game we're playing. And so I tried to lay this out very clearly. And when we talked in our session 0, I talked about, this is going to be a sprawling epic fantasy game, and it's going to have a plot line to it. It's not a sandbox per se. You have choices you get to make, and there are a million places you can go and a million ways you can approach the problems. But it's not just like we're doing jobs for money. It's like there is something behind all of this that you're going to be working toward. The players were all cool with that. They understand that. They know me. They know what's going to happen. And some of that was implicit just by our nature. But if you're walking into a situation that's new to you, you don't know everybody or you aren't familiar with, that expectation setting, both directions, is so crucial to making sure that everyone at the table is having a good time. And I don't think it's ever anyone's goal to not have everyone everyone wants everyone at the table having a good time. But in order to do that, everyone has to be on the same page. And almost 100% of the time, if people are not having fun, it comes down to expectations. Someone has done something that is against what they were expecting to get out of the game. And it's super important.
Were any of those rules read the spell before you cast it?
No, and it should have been. When we get ready for season 2, that's going to go onto the rule sheet.
Update the contract. Look, man, just read this.
Just read the goddamn spell. No, let me see if I have them, because I think that they are. This is a totally different set of rules. I have too many things in this Google Docs labeled rules.
Oh, gosh.
Nope, I guess not. They're nowhere to be found, but that's fine.
Well, anyway, once again, thanks for joining me on this interview. Super happy about it, and I feel like it's went pretty well.
Well, and once again, thank you so much for having me. I love coming to talk to people, and hopefully I gave any amount of insight that you find valuable.
Oh, you did. You definitely did. Well, thank you all for listening. As always, I'm Daniel from Ready Set Roll. You can always find me at the show links below. And you can find Mr. Reed. Go ahead and plug yourself.
Yeah. So you can find info about our show at adventureincpod.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter at, let me make sure I have it right. At AdventureIncPod. Just add AdventureIncPod on Twitter. And then we're on Facebook and Discord and all kinds of other places too. But anywhere you can find us, just come and chat with us.
All right. Well, everyone, you have a good night. And once again, thank you for joining me on Insight.